Welcome to Daily Drive for Tuesday, March 17th, 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Nissan jumps on the reverse import bandwagon. VinFast slashes its North Carolina factory plans by 80%, and Audi pulls the plug on the A8 flagship sedan with no replacement coming. Plus, Venturis CEO Ronald Kleiweg talks about how the Iran war is disrupting automotive supply chains.
It used to be a plan B was enough. Now you probably need to have a plan C and a plan D nowadays even, right? Where you source your products from and what mode of transport are you going to use.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Nissan is shipping its Tennessee-built Murano crossover to Japan starting early next year. It will be the first American-made Nissan sold there since the 1990s. The steering wheel stays on the left side, American style. That's the wrong side for Japanese roads. New Japanese rules now allow U.S. spec vehicles to be sold as is, a move meant to address trade tensions with Washington. Toyota and Honda are making similar moves, reverse importing their own U.S.-built models. But analysts are skeptical. Christopher Richter at CLSA puts it bluntly. He says, quote, "Who the heck will buy these? The wheel is on the right side." VinFast is moving forward with its North Carolina factory, sort of. The Vietnamese EV maker plans to restart construction this year, but with a dramatically smaller footprint. According to Business North Carolina, the plant will now create just 1,400 jobs. That's down 80% from the 7,500 originally promised. The massive cut puts $315 million in state incentives at risk, and the timing's tricky. VinFast's fourth quarter losses widened 15% to $1.3 billion, even as the company doubled vehicle deliveries. The company says it'll start making vehicles there in 2028. And Audi is pulling the plug on its A8 flagship sedan after more than 3 decades, and there's no replacement coming. The automaker closed order books in Germany last month and will sell through what's left. It's a sign of how the luxury sedan market has shifted. Buyers want SUVs, and automakers want the higher profit margins that come with them. The numbers tell the story. According to Dataforce, Audi sold just 2,400 A8s in Europe last year. That's less than half what BMW and Mercedes moved. The all-new Q9 SUV will step into the flagship role, launching later this year. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. The FTC just sent warning letters to 97 dealership groups about what it's calling illegal advertising practices. Legal experts say this isn't just about those 97 groups. It's a wake-up call for the entire industry. Our own John Hutter has been covering this story for us at Automotive News, and he joins me now. John, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Hey, thanks.
So, John, you talked to some dealership attorneys about this. What's their take on why the FTC is doing this now, especially since the cars rule got thrown out last year?
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the attorneys mentioned that it was, it might have taken, since we had that change in administrations from the Biden administration's FTC to the Trump administration's FTC, they were kind of the leadership over at the commission were trying to figure out what their priorities would be. And now, and it's about a year into the Trump second term. And so now they've kind of, I guess, decided, they figured out where they want to go as an agency. And so that was one of their thoughts. The other one was, it made a good point about the Trump FTC is more focused on enforcement. It's not really working on developing new regulations. And so even though the cars rule got thrown out, the Trump FTC says, well, advertising misleading pricing is still illegal under the FTC Act anyway, so we're going to go after you for that.
Now, why should everyone in the industry be watching this?
The sentiment under one of the attorneys I spoke to in the Virginia Auto Dealers Association was that this was kind of this matters to all dealers, not just the 97 groups that the FTC wrote letters to. So really, for dealerships, you're going to want to check your advertising practices because the FTC is pretty clear. I mean, it called 6 behaviors illegal, like just outright. And and it's stuff. Here's a preview. I'm working on some data that CarEdge compiled, and it's pretty common that what the prices that dealers are advertising aren't the final out the door prices they're actually going to charge consumers after all the non-government fees and other upcharges are added on. So that's going to be a big problem for the dealers that are doing that, and that's a target for the regulators right now.
Wow, interesting stuff, John. As always, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Kelly.
Coming up next, how the Iran war is creating structural disruption in automotive supply chains. That's next on Daily Drive.
Are you a dealer creating a workplace culture your employees are proud to be part of? Applications are now open for the 2026 Automotive News Best Dealerships to Work For program. This isn't just an award, it's a chance to get real insight into what's working at your dealership and where you can improve. And we've expanded the categories this year, recognizing everything from technician experience and leadership development to AI enablement and employee retention. The registration deadline is April 17th. Find out more and apply at autonews.com.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. With oil prices fluctuating near $100 a barrel and ongoing conflict around the Strait of Hormuz, supply chain pressures are mounting for the auto industry. Ronald Kleiwick is CEO of Venturis, an enterprise software company that helps businesses manage supply chain resilience. His company's recent survey found that 61% of companies are experiencing shipment delays of up to a month, and automotive components are the most affected category. Daily Drive executive producer Jake Neer spoke with Kleiwick about how the crisis is different from the pandemic, why oil dependency matters more than fuel cost, and why companies need a Plan C and Plan D for sourcing.
Ronald, welcome to Daily Drive. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you much for your interest. Looking forward to the conversation.
So we are seeing oil approaching and sort of fluctuating near $100 a barrel amid tensions around the Strait of Hormuz. From a supply chain perspective, what actually changes for automakers and suppliers when oil spikes like this?
Well, there's always an economic impact, but I would say it's not the first time that this is happening, right? In the economic crisis, in my previous career, I also had to do analysis for the oil going up, right? About 100 or even more than $100 a barrel already at that time, and the consequences for that. I would say there is, of course, an economic impact in a way that prices will go up one way or the other. So that means that the carriers or logistic service providers, they most likely have a fuel clause in their running contracts. So in other words, they pass on that cost to their customers. Hence, these are the shippers, right? The multinational shippers, the OEMs. And eventually, then it's a choice of either absorbing it or, again, passing it on to the next, which are people like you and I, which are the consumers. So, yeah, one way or the other, there is a big economic impact, of course, for everybody.
It sure sounds like the conversations we were having around or have been having for the last year around tariffs as well. It's sort of a parallel there and a compounding parallel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like it becomes a wedding cake in a way, right? So at first there is the trade impact where importers and of course consumers are impacted. And at the same time now with the oil price, it's another cost level, right? Another cost aspect where which will affect products for sure. Either components and parts and eventually the end product, which we are buying.
Would you say that the biggest risk, especially for the auto industry here, is the fuel cost itself, or is it the disruption risk if shipping through that corridor continues to be interrupted for an extended amount of time?
I don't think it's really the corridor, because the Strait of Hormuz or the Strait of Hormuz, right, it's not so much a corridor, right, because it's a Suez, and the Suez was already impacted, right, the Red Sea or the Suez. So I think from that point of view, it doesn't have an immediate impact on lead times. Lead times already were impacted heavily when they had to go via the Cape of Good Hope, right, South Africa. So I don't think there's an immediate impact on corridors or lead times in a way. I think the oil price and the dependency on the oil coming out of Iran or the Strait of Hormuz in a way, that of course has an impact. The oil price, the dependency on oil, particularly for in China, where a lot of parts and components are coming from China, that could have an impact, right, in production. So the longer the stakes, the higher the impact. So I think it's not so much the price only; it's also the dependency on the oil which is coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. I think that could potentially have a bigger impact.
So I want to talk about your survey here. If you could just sort of fill the audience in on what you were looking at, what you're trying to figure out with this survey and sort of the parameters.
So the reason why we did a survey, we are a enterprise software solution company. And what we are providing to our clients is a solution how they can manage the need of resilience, I would almost say, right? There is a constant crisis in the meantime, either political, economical, environmental, right, which is ongoing. And they need to have a tool. And we were just investigating what are the biggest issues they are facing and the biggest issues they're having right now. And of course, the unpredictable lead times at the moment, right? How do you deal with these kind of unpredictable lead times? How do you deal with, let's say, business continuity planning, where you need to change from one mode to another mode, where the dependency on parts and components at certain locations? How can you manage that? How can you deal with that? And therefore, it was important for us to find out. And not by surprise, you can see that the unpredictability is a big issue, right? Where lead times continue to extend, where lead times will change. And yeah, the need for resilience is more than ever. And not only, I would say, in supply chain per se, it's in the entire ecosystem. Dependency on certain sources, right? Because people always talk about moving production from one region to another. But the dependency on the sourcing of parts and components, that's a much bigger issue. So I think eventually having a business continuity plan on where you source your parts and components and raw materials is becoming even more and more importantly.
How, if at all, are you seeing this current crisis or this conflict affecting, is that reflected in the survey results?
I would say so. I mean, lead times, as we said already, or transit times, right? That was an impact. So even if I said the Strait of Hormuz impact is not so much immediate an impact on lead times, of course, the ongoing crisis in the Red Sea is still a big impact because it adds at least, right, 10 or 12 more days to a large extent. There have been issues, of course, in the Panama Channel previously as well. That is still not over, right? There's still a lot of issues there. So that is an issue. But I think if you look what happened in the Strait of Hormuz, the dependency on the oil, that's another, right? In this case, it's not, let's say, a dependency on the sourcing location because of a flood, right? Or because of an earthquake. In this case, it's, again, another war. And you see, if to a large extent the oil is coming from the Strait of Hormuz, it's another kind of single source of a single sourcing location, geographic location. It shows you how important to have a multi-source location for your raw materials, your parts and components, because that more and more, right, is becoming very visible, and that is also reflected, right, in the questionnaire, and it's part of the overall lead time and the unpredictable lead time.
Yeah, your survey says 61% of companies experience shipment delays of up to a month.
Yeah,
that sounds huge.
It's huge.
How does that compare with, let's say, the pandemic years, or even the last couple of years as supply chains normalized and then were sort of challenged again before this conflict?
I think the difference to the pandemic is that at this very moment, a lot of it is impacted by infrastructure. At least I call it infrastructure, right? There's routes which are blocked. Think about a couple of the big airlines who are having a freighter capacity or belly capacity, right, are now affected because they're in Dubai. Dubai is a big, or has become a very big transfer hub for freight between, let's say, China or Asia into Europe and vice versa. The fact that airspace is closed now is a big impact. And the fact that some of these aircrafts are now grounded, that has a big impact. I consider that part of infrastructure as well. There are vessels which are still in that area, which are now stuck. There is air freight capacity, which is stuck. There are routes which are blocked. So yeah, this is not comparable to what happened in pandemic. That's where all the people got grounded. But at least, right, air freight and ocean freight capacity was still floating, right? Routes were not blocked. Of course, there was an impact in keeping distance between each other, but at the end of the day, there was still enough capacity to move goods, right? I think there was an article last week, I think, where it said if the Strait of Hormuz continues to be blocked, it will impact the people, right, living in the Emirates, for instance, right? Because supermarkets will become empty. There is an alternative route going via Jeddah and Riyadh, but ultimately, if normally they ship about 20,000 containers with products, right, for a cost of living in the Emirates, yeah, if that is not possible, there will be a huge impact over there, right? So people talk about the oil, but think about all the people living there. They cannot be provided, right, with ordinary daily products they need to have.
And Automotive components were the most impacted category in your data. What kind of parts are we talking about? Is it everything? Is it specific to,
Yeah, well, a lot of parts and components are coming from Asia, right, at the end of the day. So the lead times related to those parts and components on ocean have already been there, 10, 12 days easily, right, going via the Cape. A lot of air parts and components are also shipped by air freight, as you can imagine, parcel and air freight. The corridor going via Russia was already blocked to a large extent, with exception of China carriers. Now the airspace in the Middle East is also blocked, right? The routes are very limited. The routes have become longer. The freighter capacity or the belly capacity has been impacted. So yeah, there's an immediate impact to parts and components, to automotive, where the assembly is happening in Europe, and to an extent the other way around as well.
And does it sort of skew specifically to things like electronics, castings, batteries, anything like that, or is it across the board?
Yeah, well, you name it, especially indeed, right? Like batteries, there can be pretty much any part and component, right? If not sourced in Europe or Eastern Europe. And don't forget, right, also because the Russia-Ukraine war, a lot of parts and components which originally came from Ukraine, they had to look for other sources. If that now became Asia, now Asia again is impacted. So yeah, there is an ongoing, you have to be very flexible now where to source your product from. Where there used to be a plan B was enough. Now you probably need to have a plan C and a plan D nowadays even, right? Where you source your products from and what mode of transport are you going to use.
You can hear the rest of Venturis CEO Ronald Kleiwick's interview with Jake Neer on the upcoming bonus episode of the show, available Sunday morning. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to our own John Hutter and Hans Greimel for their reporting for today's podcast. We also had reporting from Frank Volk of our sibling publication, Automobile Voca. You can get the latest news on supply chains, manufacturing, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for a conversation with our own Hans Greimel, whose latest column says Nissan gets the last laugh after its failed merger with Honda.
Now it's Honda that's in the world of hurt, just as Nissan seems to be finding its feet.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoyed the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.